The MonsterVerse continues. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today I've got my ranking of all 5 MonsterVerse movies with the release of Godzilla x Kong. And I'm doing this tier list style, but before I get into it, be sure to hit that like button and comment down below your ranking of all these MonsterVerse films. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. I mean, quite a bit. And if you want to watch movies and TV shows with me, you can do so on my Patreon link down below. I'm dropping commentary tracks for Stranger Things right now, but I'm venturing into other movies and shows very soon, and your support over on Patreon means the world. But without further ado, let's dive into this tier list. Alright, so the tiers I have are the best, really good, solid, meh, and the worst. One will go in the top, one will go in the bottom, and the rest will fill out these other tiers. But without further ado, let's start off with Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out in 2021. And this was at a time when the pandemic was still very prominent, and so HBO Max was getting movies the same day they hit theaters. Dune was one of those, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad was one of those, and Godzilla vs. Kong was also one of those. This film, super underwhelming in my opinion. Yes, you get to see Godzilla fight Kong, and even part of the film you get to see them both fight Mechagodzilla. But that alone is not enough to save this film from a horrendous main human storyline that drags and takes up way too much screen time. I remember walking out of this film super disappointed. Sure, some of the visuals were neat. I'll give the movie credit for developing Kong. I'm Team Kong to the end of the line. But when it comes to Godzilla, I could not care less. Overall, I found the movie to be a bit of a boring and predictable mess, and because of that, I don't really see myself revisiting it for the foreseeable future. I'm putting it in the meh tier. Next, we've got Godzilla King of the Monsters. Talk about a snooze fest. To me, this is the worst film in this franchise. For a movie called King of the Monsters, there is a surprising lack of Godzilla in this film. They deprived us of his presence on screen. And the human characters are probably the least interesting they've ever been in this entire franchise in King of the Monsters. There's a handful of pretty cool moments, and some of the visuals stand out, but none of that is enough to save this movie from absolute boredom. It's by far the least memorable of this franchise to me, and it was a struggle to sit through this back when I watched it for the first time. Next, we got Kong Skull Island, the movie I can finally say good things about for the most part. This is the clear standout to me in this franchise. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the best, because it is a movie with a distinct style and directorial voice. It's got some gorgeous imagery, specifically the shot here on the poster of Kong with the sun behind him and the helicopters flying towards him. It's a war movie in a sense, with some commentary on the horrors of war. You've got a stacked cast with Samuel L. Jackson, Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, John C. Reilly, the list goes on, and there are decent enough human characters to where you can actually feel the stakes a bit, and because of the scale of Kong in this film, you're like, oh my gosh, no one's getting out of this island alive. Once we're on Skull Island, there are elements of horror that rise up in this film, and I was all in. The movie's also unintentionally hilarious at times. There's one scene with the actor Shea Wiggum that you've probably seen on all the social medias before. It's made the rounds. Every time I watch it, I pause, and I'm fascinated, and I laugh my ass off. It's hilarious. It actually is laughable how many classic rock songs they use. It's almost like they went through CCR greatest hits or something. But Kong Skull Island's intense, there's badass action, and Kong feels huge in scale, making us resonate with the human characters in this film because, again, they're decently written, and so that's all it really takes to make an enjoyable enough MonsterVerse movie, and Kong Skull Island's the best. Also, I've realized maybe I'm more of a Kong guy than Godzilla, it's just my personal preference, but I've always thought this is the standout movie, and it's actually highly entertaining and enjoyable, two qualities that most of these other films lack. Next, we've got Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, the newest film in the franchise. My full review is linked up above. This movie's not my jam at all. I thought that it was such a bore. It falls victim yet again to horribly underdeveloped human characters that are painfully uninteresting, and they dominate the majority of the screen time. For the first hour, about 45 to 50 minutes are devoted to this human storyline. Blah, 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 blah. I don't care. We've done this a billion times, it feels like. If you go watch this movie, sure, there's a point in time where you're going to see Godzilla and Kong fight alongside each other. That's the big marketing draw. But you're going to have to wait quite some time, and it wasn't very satisfying when it finally rolled around. Honestly, Kong was the standout of this movie. They gave him a backstory that allowed us to resonate with him a bit and really feel for him as his kind is being held captive, and you're like, damn, that's horrible. In fact, in the middle of the movie, there's a really cool fight scene where I was like, I'm a little locked in right now. But Godzilla has a surprisingly small presence in this film. It's almost like the director had him in his back pocket and was like, we gotta keep him around for the third act, we can pull him out, and then we can have 4 monsters clashing and destroying a city. A thing the movie does as well that made me laugh out loud was the amount of times in the third act we would go to a new location within like 2 minutes and it would pop up the city on screen when it was showing us an iconic landmark from said city. It got a good laugh out of me. I know a lot of the hardcore Godzilla fans out there love this movie. As a casual, someone who just watches the MonsterVerse and -1, I'm pretty much burnt out on the MonsterVerse, and this movie is like the final nail in the coffin where I'm like, sure, I might go see whatever they do next, but there's no heart in this movie. There's not a lot of heart in this franchise. It feels just like, hey, let's pump this out and try and make $1 billion because the human characters I don't feel for. But then you've got a movie like Godzilla -1, which does everything right. You've got human characters that you feel for, you can root for them and feel the stakes. The scale of Godzilla is felt. Like in this movie, all the monsters almost seem tiny in a way until the very third act, and so it just wasn't doing it for me. I really want to like these movies. It hurts them so much, though, when the human characters are very underdeveloped, and the movie almost needs to commit to Godzilla or Kong as the main hero as opposed to having them both in the title, and then it's like, oh, we're not getting enough of either. So I'm gonna put this in meh. I'm actually gonna go behind Godzilla vs. Kong because at least that movie was building up to something epic. Godzilla x Kong was just like, what's the point of it? Like, what are we doing at this point? And then we've got Godzilla from 2014, the one that started it all with director Gareth Edwards. I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of Godzilla in this movie, but that's okay because the human characters are fine enough. I'm gonna go solid with this movie. Bryan Cranston and Aaron Taylor Johnson are the leads here. Even though we only get a handful of scenes with Godzilla himself, they're undeniably pretty epic in scale. And Bryan Cranston's character was by far the most interesting. I wish we got more of him in this movie because he was the clear standout. Maybe that's my bias because I do love him as Walter White, but I think he's one of the best developed characters maybe in the entire MonsterVerse. The first half of this movie was definitely stronger than the second because eventually it just turned into your run-of-the-mill disaster movie that we've seen over and over in Hollywood. For the most part, I was entertained, but it's nothing special in my opinion. It's a solid enough watch. It's a movie you could watch on an airplane and kill 2 hours easily, but it's not one I really see myself revisiting. It's just a better structured movie that has actual character arcs and payoffs, as opposed to some of the later films in the franchise that just become big monsters fighting with no real plot or cohesion. And I think the reason this one stands out compared to some of the others is the vision from Gareth Edwards. The man knows how to direct some visually stunning films, but also create that scale. You watch something like Rogue One, the Death Star feels huge. You've got the AT-ATs towering over the rebels. Then you watch something like The Creator. The same thing can be said there with these huge set pieces, and that's where I'll commend Godzilla from 2014. Godzilla is huge in scale, and they create this tension and build up to his ultimate reveal. So there's that added level of interest as a viewer, as opposed to some of these other films where Godzilla and Kong are just running around. We know they're eventually going to team up, and at this point, the franchise doesn't really have characters. It's just, let's throw Godzilla and Kong on screen and have them fight whoever to try and make $1 billion. But yeah, that does it for my ranking of the MonsterVerse movies. If you can't tell, I'm not too high on this series of films. I wish we got more projects like Kong Skull Island, but unfortunately it looks like we're gonna get more Godzilla x Kong films where they're just fighting whatever monster they pull out of the archives, and yeah. Because of that, I'm pretty burnt out. But if you guys are fans of the MonsterVerse, let me know your ranking in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified for all my future videos and help me reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. But that'll do it. Thank you guys as always for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.